Fans, do I have a gem of a guest for you today on Relatively Sports with Eugene Napoleon? He's none other than our fullback, Chris Peccon, played for the Mountaineers from 82 through 86. What a great guy, has a few stories and some real good info that he and I was talking about prior to bringing him on the show. You're going to really love him, Chris Peccon. My man,
What's
Chris
up,
Peccon.
G?
What up?
How have you been, man?
Listen, brother, I'm blessed. Listen, I'm even more blessed now because I have you on my show finally. How are you? What's
Funny.
going on? How's the family?
Everybody's doing okay. They're all in college. I'm going to my son Nick's game tonight. Plays basketball for St. Vincent. So kind of excited to see him back on the court. Been a while.
I know that's right.
Yes.
Let me tell you something. So this is an honor because you and I talked behind the scenes a while ago about some of the things I think young student athletes need to understand. And a lot of that starts with what you and I was talking about. We talked about the word commitment. We talked about being accountable to your teammates.
Right.
You know, those sort of things. I think that's a little bit lost, Chris, in today's game for some odd reason. What do you think about that?
I wonder how much film that is, or how much they film in practice. Because we used to be filmed in practice doing our job, because everybody has a job on every play. And they throw a lot of different looks at you in the practice. So plus we had to hit. And that's where I don't think they have the advantage. It's not a bad thing to cut it back a little bit from what we did.
Right.
We were our heads like crazy. But I just think I'd have to be there to really know what they're missing. You know, you have to spend a week or so.
Right. I think. I tell you one thing. We were fortunate. I overlapped you because your senior year was 86, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's the year I transferred into WVU. I had to sit out, but I had the pleasure of watching you play. You were there from 82 to 86.
Yes.
So I had the pleasure of watching you guys play. And here's the interesting thing that I realized. You playing fullback, which is such a key position back then compared to what it is now. The game has changed so much that fullbacks now are not really fullbacks. They're freaking they're anything but fullbacks, right? When you played your job, you took your job so serious and you did such a heck of a job of doing that, be it blocking for the quarterback, blocking for the tailback, being in the passing game, all these different things that I don't think the game has changed so much. We don't have that type of position the way it used to be. But the thing that you did the most, Chris, you took great pride in what you did at your position each and every play. That's what I think some of these young people are missing that, Chris. They're missing the passion of it.
We all did. We talked earlier, we were all held accountable. And I don't know if the game has changed. It's the trends. The trends have changed. Like when Rich Rodriguez came up, he had that new offense, which everybody kind of runs it now. So it's just changed. But getting back to it, the real question was, we took pride. We had to watch film of ourselves and be critiqued by the coach in front of the rest of the running backs. So you could be sitting there and you know what I did wrong, probably as the coach is pointing it out, or whoever was being coached or looked at that particular play was held accountable. And you had a little bit of a pride that in the fact that you wanted to do your job. You didn't want to be the lightweight or the weak link, just like in anybody feels the same way when they're critiqued.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What's some of your fond memories wearing, donning that wonderful uniform that we all don. What are some of your fond memories, man?
A lot of it, a lot of those memories, and you're going to laugh, they're off the field. I don't even, I remember winning a game. I remember a play here and there, but it's just the continued relationships. And, you and Anthony Brown came over from Pitt. You guys were like superstars or rock stars, as they say. You came on campus and everybody knew who you guys were. Of course, you were Pitt players, which we did welcome you with open arms.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you made the right choice. You made the right choice. You made a mistake going to Pitt.
Well, you know what? They say when you get an opportunity to do it twice, usually the second time you make the right decision, right?
Well, I think, yeah. I think you would have transferred twice, I think. But it's if they weren't a school that we probably respected so much, it wouldn't be such a rivalry. When I was growing up, I'm a little bit older than you, even though I may not look it, but I'm a little older than you. And that's when Pitt really came on in the late early 80s, especially with Tony Dorsett and Dan Marino. That was just that was a team that, I mean, let's face it, you went to Pitt because of the notoriety, as well as them being on TV, and it just was top programs.
If you were running back then, late 70s, early 80s, I was such a huge Tony Dorsett fan. That was my guy.
I know.
To this day, that's my guy. So I went to Pitt primarily because I wanted to, everything that Tony did in college, I wanted to emulate in. So that was probably the biggest reason why I went to Pittsburgh. And interestingly enough, it brings me to this point. What made you select WVU?
That is, I really didn't select WVU. I was going to the University of Delaware, and there was a guy in town that had a business that my dad knew forever, that went to school at Salem and knew Donnie Young very well, and which was the head recruiting coordinator for many years. And my 3 or 4 best films never made it to West Virginia, and they finally made it there through the help of a guy named Bill Snowdy, who's had him, made sure Donnie Young looked at him, and they called me. I remember it was my mother's birthday, May 1st, way past recruiting season being finished. And Coach Nealon, he didn't know I'm not saying I was big enough to play fullback, but I managed. But he didn't think I was as big as what he saw, or he didn't really see my better films. So he offered me a invited walk-on, which is pretty tough because you have to find your way through everybody else that's been recruited needs to get that chance. I mean, because they're first in line. And so that's pretty much the story there. And I'm only 30 minutes away from WVU. So that helped. My support for the family. And I could come home and get my clothes washed. I took advantage of that. Refuel.
And see, that's the beauty of it, though. What you're talking about, and here's what a lot of young student athletes don't get. You came to WVU as a preferred walk-on, but at the end of the day, you wound up playing. And see, here's the key. I think kids don't understand. They misconstrue being so highly recruited to someone who really had to earn it. Not to say that a kid who's recruited didn't earn it, but my point is you had a different motivation. And you did everything you were supposed to do and then some to earn your spot and earn your way on the field. That's something that I wish these young people could understand today, man. You got to work and you got to be consistent. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, Chris. I don't think our young student athletes really understand what that's all about.
But I don't know if there's an opportunity for them, since they don't hit, or maybe they're not allowed to hit as frequently as we did in practice. How do they make the team? Interesting. I walked on And John Hollifield walked on in 1983, January, with Harvey Smith as his roommate. And John, of course, John and I were starters as our senior year in the backfield. We shared the backfield prior couple of years here and there, depending on what lineup we had. And Harvey and John ended up being captains. John in 86, Harvey in 87. So we always laugh that Coach Nealon was lagging behind a little bit in recruiting that year because we all walked on and we beat out his recruit.
But that's my point. You can never judge or measure heart.
Well, yeah, no, you can't. But I don't know if there's the opportunity. How do you make the team? You and I talked about that the other day. If they aren't allowed to hit, and there's big criticisms in sports. I know they had to trim some of the head hunting, helmet to helmet things away, and just like they talk about in basketball, and the NBA has changed, and the players, it's not their fault. It's the rules changed. The rules have changed. So it's not the young man's fault. The rules have changed, and I'm not so sure that there are those Vince Lombardi types out there, which I just looked it up out of curiosity yesterday, where the year before he got there, the Packers only won one game.
Yeah.
And with the same players, he was able to win 7-5 the next year. Yeah. And that came from just, they really worked hard and they hit, and he motivated them and he brought out the best in them. That's an extreme example because Lombardi is probably the number one coach as far as motivation.
Right.
And just using simple plays, just like we ran the 58 and that 59, the handoff sweep. Lombardi, it said, interview with John Madden, he went to a clinic and he said Lombardi talked about the Packers sweep for 6 hours. 6 hours straight. And that kind of reminds me of our handoff sweep, where there was so many different levels. The fullback heads out, has this check, the guard has their own things to check. And we ran that play out against different defenses in practice, 100 times in practice, against everything. They threw it, and we did it live. And that's, I think, what's missing maybe is that style of intensity. And I mean, there's no reason to film these kids today, these players, if they're not hitting. I mean, what are you filming them doing? So we had to sit there, remember? Oh my, here it comes. I messed up yesterday, and then boom, and they filmed you right.
Yeah, we had all these different sideline angles, the behind angle, end zone angle, right.
Nobody was hidden, and it was that high resolution black and white film, remember? Where, I mean, there was like 30 shades, well, I shouldn't say that, but there was so much detail with that black and white film that, I mean, there was not, you could see a hand, you could see everything. There wasn't any
absolutely
colors.
Well, I tell you one thing you couldn't do. Yes, sir.
Exactly. You're not low enough, or come in, protect the ball, catch it, look. Back thinking, you're like, I don't know, coach. I'll do better next time.
It goes back to that accountability that I think is so very important, man. That accountability stems from, for me, that's a life skill that's taught through the game of football, which I think is an amazing I think that is so important.
Not only that, it's just like the way you dress and present yourself. You want to present yourself to your teammates that they say, okay, look at that. Okay, that's why he's playing. I can see why he's playing. Sure. I can see, or you don't want them behind the scenes, like, man, he's not that good. Why is he in there? And you want to stand and walk proud. And game is it's I don't say it's easy, but it's so much easier to get up for a game than it is practice. When you get up at 6, 7, 8, get treatment, go to class, come back, you get taped, you're tired, you're sleepy from whatever, just you don't feel like going there. You don't. And it takes a lot to get up and get that adrenaline. One thing that did it though, Gene, is you'd be looking over and saying, "Oh my God, look at what so and so did on films that you watch right before practice. You watch films." There's my alarm. You watch yesterday's films right before you go on the field today.
That's right.
Then if you didn't do well and you saw everybody else is up to par, like you feel like they're gaining on you or passing you up as far as potential playing time, that really ignites you. And if you're hitting in practice, it's not their fault because they don't allow them. How much hitting?
It's a little bit different.
We touched on this before. How much hitting did we do? It was a little too much at times for, maybe not for, you were carrying the ball. I mean, we were blocking. And it got to be a little bit, it had to be draining.
I'm going to tell you something. I think that the physicality back then of what West Virginia was, offense and defense and special teams, was second to none because, like you said, we were a very physical football team. So I appreciated the physicality. I definitely appreciated the competitive nature of what we had, because my years there, we had so much talent, similar to your years there. There was a lot of talent in that running back room. And as you just spoke on, you really had to put it together each and every practice because you had so much talent there. But you did what you had to do to make sure that you stayed on the field.
We were pretty much every week we had to, and whoever was the hot hand, you got to admit, if a guy fumbled the ball a few times in practice or didn't give effort, you slip down. Now you may be in the program you're starting, but you lose your space. And that's how, Coach Nealon, it worked, but that system was a little bit brutal on a player's mind. And you have to be mentally tough. And how many times did that happen? It happened to me a few times where I have a bad practice, but did that ever happen to you?
We had 3 back station at that tailback position. Me, A.B. Brown, and Andre Johnson.
Andre, yeah, and A.B.
So everybody pretty much knew, like you said, you had to produce in practice. You had to produce when you had to grade out a certain percentage throughout the week to make sure you knew what you were doing. So when you played on Saturdays, you wasn't getting the quarterback killed, or you understood in the passing game, you understood your checkdowns in the blocking game. These are all things that if you didn't know, it was your responsibility as a player to stay on top of those things. And if you didn't, like you said, you might slip a little bit. Your carries might get lessened a little bit. Your play time was lessened a little bit, but it kept you on your toes in that competitive nature.
Exactly. The other thing we failed to, we did touch on it, but what about the linemen? When they made a good block, I know you made sure you pumped them up, and you got to remember, if they make these blocks and you're not making plays or I'm not making plays, that's what we're talking about, being accountable. You have the 5 linemen up there, the tight end, and everybody, they get their blocks, and I come through, I don't get my block, you go the wrong way, and you're thinking like you want to hide and you want to apologize, like, hey man, so it motivates you to do better. And and now that was not only in the game, because Coach Nealon was brutal. I remember, I think I told you, I was on special teams my sophomore year, kickoff return, I ran and came back, and as soon as I turned around, this guy leveled me. A great player, we won't need to talk about it, from Maryland, but I went on my back and slid on the turf. The next day, Coach Nealon is running it back and forth, back and forth. Who is this? Who is this? Everybody's laughing because he did the special teams, if you remember, in the meeting room. Everybody, the whole team was there, the big meeting room. And he knew it was me. And I had to raise my hand. I said, me, coach. And he said, who's me? I said, Chris Peccon. And he said, what are you doing here? So he chastised me a little bit. So I brought them up to him years later. And we were laughing. And do you know what he said to me? He turned with that figure. He goes, did you do it again? I said, no. He said, there you go. That's my point. So that was his point. Gene, I got so Chuck Fawcett played inside linebacker. He played for, I think he went to the Chargers for 6 years.
I believe so, yes.
For the same year, he came down on that kickoff and he helped me up. He's a nice guy, you know, after the play, but he crushed me. But that's what I'm talking about. Now that's an extreme example.
Right, I got you though.
You have a story about that?
Well, listen, he was a great player.
I'm not
no, but I understand.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and Coach Nealon was really good for that because he would make a point if there was a mistake made. He wanted to make sure that you understood not to make that same mistake again. He understood making mistakes, missed assignments, but if you were going to play for him, you couldn't have 5 or 6 missed assignments and expect to play. And I understood that. I have about a minute left, but I want to ask you this real quick in closing for these young student athletes. What would be the last, like a word of advice for a young person trying to pick a college today?
Wow. Rodney Gallagher Jr. is headed to West Virginia. He went to my high school, and both of my sons are friends with him. And I said, you know, I'm not going to tell you to go to WVU because I went there or I'm a fan or I love the Mountaineers. Just think about being closer to home, to have that support system, to come home and get your clothes washed, have a dinner, and come back away from that pressure that you might have, or maybe you're not going to have the pressure, but to have that. So I just say, pick a college, pick a school that's going to be maybe not so far away, and maybe just more welcoming, and the guys, you get that feel. I wanted to ask you about Pitt. Remember we talked? Right. What were the differences? Because I want to know what you think the differences were. Because you're very unique. You and AB are the few people that have played for Pitt against West Virginia and then for West Virginia. So tell me, I want to know.
Real quick, because I have about a minute to 2 minutes left. I'm gonna say this.
Man. Okay.
I think the biggest difference was being at Pitt. Everybody expected to be a stud, a superstar. When I came in '85, we had so many high school Americans, me being one of them, going to that program that you expected something a little bit different. So I think the level of certain players feeling they were entitled was one thing. Transferring to WVU, I didn't feel that entitlement. I felt more of a family atmosphere. Not to say that it wasn't that way at Pitt, but to a certain extent, it really wasn't. There was more of a camaraderie and more of a brotherhood at WVU than what I felt when I was at Pittsburgh my freshman year. And it was instant. It was instant. So for me, I have to say, the relationships, the brotherhood, the accountability from one man to the next, I felt that more at West Virginia than I did at Pittsburgh. And that was a huge difference. Because if you're close, we won the close games and won games at WVU because we really cared for one another. Whereas if you go to another program and everybody's arrogant enough to think that I'm the dude, you're not really caring about the guy to the right of you or to the left of you. It's all about you. I didn't get that at WVU.
WVU, we had more of a feeling everybody wants to contribute. If you're asked to do this, I'm going to do it good. If you ask me to block, you know, I'm going to do my best. Now, the last thing I wanted to ask you, it was on the tip of my tongue, was the pride in West Virginia. I mean, I think it came from also being a family. And like you're saying,
absolutely.
Um,
Chris, I'm gonna close this segment out by saying this because you're 100% right. The pride of playing at that university, playing for the state, playing for yourself as well, but wanting to win for the pride of being a Mountaineer was a totally different feeling than what I felt being a Pitt Panther. I didn't have that same pride or the same family feeling that I had at West Virginia versus being at Pitt. That's a huge monumental difference in your whole psyche when you're putting on that uniform. It wasn't just about me. So it was about making sure that we played for the pride of the university, obviously our family, for each other. That was a totally different mindset, man.
I know you remember this because we've spoken about this last week. When you and A.B. Brown came in, you invited everybody. I didn't live in Towers. I didn't live in the dorm. You invited everybody to your dorm room, running backs from the meeting room, and whoever came up, and you had pizza for everybody. So yeah, you guys, I don't know where you get the idea, but I think it was like January, you just transferred of 86. And I don't know if we had training table down below in the cafeteria, and you invited everybody up. And I remember feeling like this warm feeling that you guys fit in from day one. Because, I mean, and just by having some pizza.
We were both, let me tell you something real quick. Me and AB,
you guys took care of it.
I say that's something that I mean, Chris, that even to this day, you look at this, man, all these years later, you and I are still close, brother. That's what it is, man. That's really what it's about. And if you pick a university where you have that camaraderie and that brotherhood, you cannot break that. So imagine playing like that for each other. Exactly. You're going to win more games than lose if you really have that.
You know what? And I know we don't really want to get into this, but we would all go out and we'd be hanging out wherever it was. And I just remember there was such a cohesive, we were a unit. And I remember a couple of times somebody asking me, what was the biggest, like they went to a different school, what was the biggest fraternity on campus? What was the most popular, biggest on campus? You know what I'd say? The West Virginia Mountaineer football team. That was the biggest fraternity. And you had to do more to get into that and spend time and to earn your respect, like we're talking about. But it was that, and I'm sure that kids are like that today. And there's nothing negative I can say about that. It's just the times have changed, the rules have changed. And I remember going helmet to helmet. When somebody would come up and they'd break down, and hit them right in the face. I remember doing stuff. It's not play is brutal. It's but anyways.
No, listen, brother, I appreciate you. You make sure, man, tell your son good luck tonight in his b-ball game. Chris, I appreciate you being on Relatively Sports with me, brother.
You know who's I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of meeting Tim Agee.
Yes.
Tim Agee. He came and stayed with me he's living in California, Los Angeles. And for some reason, he's back on the East Coast, and he's coming to this game, and he'll also be staying with me again. But he's the guy I looked up to in old school, man.
Tell him I said, what's up?
I will.
And tell him I would love to have him more on my show, man.
All right, man.
I will see.
That's hello, by the way.
I'll see you soon, Chris. Thank you, brother.
Love you, man. Always.
Love you too. You got it. Well, Mountaineer fans, what did I tell you? This guy is one of my better storytellers that I've been around in years. I love Chris. You can see how passionate he is about Mountaineer sports, man, especially football. What a great guy. He came in as a walk-on, earned his stripes, earned to start by the time he was a senior. Just a great overall dude, man. And I'm so glad to have him on Relatively Sports with me. So I'm glad that you had a chance to get to meet him, get to hear some of his stories, and just a great Mountaineer. So once again, I will see you next week with another surprise guest. But I thank God for Chris Peccon coming on the show today, and I hope you enjoyed him. Take care. Let's go, Mountaineers.